Hi, today we're going to talk about upgrading from Drupal 8 to Drupal 9, how simple it is and how it could be done in just 5 simple steps. But first let's talk about the upgrade process itself. Now, unlike every other previous version of Drupal, Drupal 8 has done some things very differently. And moving forward, going from 8 to 9, from 9 to 10, is going to be different than anything that's happened before. And in fact, this is something that Dries has said, that really the big deal about Drupal 9 is that it's not really a big deal. In fact, going from Drupal 8 to Drupal 9 is really no different than doing a minor release of Drupal 8 itself, with just a few simple exceptions. So when we talk about going from upgrading Drupal in any previous version, there was always a complete shift because we were not able to, not unafraid to break backwards compatibility in order to make Drupal better and better. However, we've reached a place with Drupal 8 that we're able to do some things with technology and with the way we structure it that we no longer have to do this. And so we don't have to do a complete and total rebuild to go from a major version to a major version, which is what we're seeing now from 8 to 9. And the reason we can do this is because of the way that we're handling deprecations. Now, if you look at something like the Drupal 8.7 API, this is the structure for how the code works, for the internal calls that it makes. And you can see that in 8.7, we added some new features, some new solution, and we deprecated something else. Now, what it means when we deprecated something in the code, there's an object or a function or a method, or there's some part of the code where we've said, okay, this still works today, but in the future, we're actually going to get rid of this piece and we're going to replace it with something else. Now, when we start going and talking about later versions of Drupal, like 8.9, you can see that not only have we added additional new solutions, we may have other bits of deprecated code. That code still works, everything is fine, but in the future it's going away and there's going to be a different way to solve that problem. You'll also notice here that Drupal's built based on Symfony 3 as part of Drupal 8. Now, when we start talking about Drupal 9, there are just a few minor differences. We still have any of the new solutions, any of the standard tools and code that we want, but you'll notice that deprecated code has been removed. We've taken that out, and now you have to use whatever the new way of solving that problem is. So instead of using the Drupal set message function, you would actually call a service to get your messages out to the logger. The other big thing that this allows us to do is to make some large changes to some of the foundational pieces. So you'll see here, Symfony 3 is going to be end of life, and so Drupal 9 is based on Symfony 4.4. And this process is what allows us to seamlessly move from one to the other. The big trick, of course, is we have to be mindful of that deprecated code. So what that means is that Drupal 8.9 and Drupal 9.0 are almost identical. The difference is that any deprecated functions have been removed and third-party dependencies may have been updated. But otherwise, this means that any Drupal 8 modules that are not using deprecated code will continue to work on Drupal 9 just fine. So we don't have to rebuild your entire site, your application, you don't have to rebuild your modules. You just have to make sure that those modules are going to work in this new environment, and we'll take a look at that. Now, this whole new process is pretty incredible, and it's enabling us to do things as a community much, much faster than we've ever done anything before because there's less work, right? We can use almost all of the same code, we just have to make a few changes. I'm going to show you a few slides that came from the Dries note at DrupalCon in the spring of 2021. These numbers are actually much, much better today, but we know that when Drupal 9 launched, most of the contrib modules that people wanted were at least available, and 10 months after Drupal 9's release, 90% of the top 50 modules were ready. In fact, we can see at that same time period, we actually had a huge number, 67% of the top 1,000. And some of those the fixes were actually going to be even simpler. They just hadn't been implemented yet. And we've got a tool that helps us do that. So we know that going from Drupal 8 to Drupal 9 is not that big a deal. It's going to be pretty easy for us. We know that there's several steps involved. Let's talk about what those steps are, because once you understand those 5 steps, it doesn't matter how big your Drupal 8 site is, you'll still follow those same basic steps in order to do the migration, whether it's a very large application or it's a small one. So these are those 5 steps. Number 1, ensure that you have a Drupal 9 compatible environment for your new, for the site that you're upgrading. Number 2, make sure the Drupal 8 core is up to date. Ideally, you have all of your updates for all of your code. Things are at the latest versions. That's going to make your life easier. Same thing with your contrib projects. Make sure you've got those updated. In fact, if you do that, some of your contributed projects, maybe all of them, will already be ready for Drupal 9. So you'll be kind of one step ahead of there. Search through your custom code and look for any places you're using deprecated code. We actually have some tools that will help do this for you. So we'll identify where you're using deprecated code or where you should make changes to things. So that part is actually, again, pretty simple. Once you've removed all of your deprecated code, you've got your core and contrib up to date, you're using the latest versions for everything. All you have to do then is upgrade core itself to Drupal 9, and you should be good to go. Now, one thing that you'll notice is that several of these steps are powered or enhanced by using Composer. And Composer is a big, it's a package management tool. It's a big part of using Drupal 8 and beyond. So let's take a minute and talk about what Composer is in case you may not be familiar. So what is Composer? Well, Composer is a package and dependency management tool for PHP. What that means is that I can go into my PHP application, in this case Drupal, and I can say, I need to add this new module, or this new feature. And maybe that module depends on some other code, and maybe that code depends on some other code, and maybe that code depends on some other code. Well, now I don't have to worry about that whole long dependency chain and figuring out what I need to use. Composer manages and tracks all of that for me, which makes my life much, much easier. And this is also why we're able to use non-Drupal PHP code in our tools and our systems, because we can pull in those dependencies and libraries and make them available in the system, even if they weren't originally built for Drupal. And we also have code that was built for Drupal, but because it was built in this way, other systems can use it with Composer as well. So it's a great way for us to kind of get off the island. Now, this isn't something that's new. This has been around for a long time, and in fact, most languages and frameworks out there have some type of dependency management and package management tool that's available. For Composer, for PHP, it's Composer. So let's take a look and see what's actually happening here. And we've got this little life cycle we're going to go through. These images are actually coming from Composer the Right Way by Raphael Doms. But you can see we start with our composer.json file. And that composer.json file is really just a list of the packages or the components that you want, whether they're Drupal modules or PHP libraries. It's got some information in there about configuration or if you want to make patches. Don't worry too much about that. Just know that you're managing all of your projects here. And this happens in a cycle. So you have your composer.json. When you run Composer, it's going to make a call out to Packagist. Packagist is a listing service that allows you to figure out, okay, I need this particular module. What is it? What versions are available? Where does it live? The Packagist is going to then direct Composer to know where the original source of that component or library is. And then Composer is going to actually take that and pull it into the vendor folder in your code base. And so now we're going to have that external package is going to be pulled in to our code base automatically. And then Composer is going to create a composer.lock file that's going to list out the specifics of exactly what was built and exactly what's in here for future use. So let's see what happens if we look a little bit more closely on that. So let's go in and say that we're going to be upgrading to Drupal core. And so we say, we require in our Composer Drupal core 9.1.0 or greater. That's what the little up caret means. Package just says, okay, great. Well, we actually have 9.1.7. and it matches your requirements. It is greater than 9.1.0. It's the latest version. It's got a GA release. Take it. So that goes to the source. That gets pulled into our installation. And then you can see our composer.lock says, hey, we're actually using Drupal core version 9.1.7. Now in our composer.json file, we just gave it a rough parameter. We said we want something that's higher than this. The composer.lock file, which is generated by Composer, are the specific and exact version numbers that we have. Now, we did put together a workshop that we delivered as part of the extended Drupal days after DrupalCon 2021. If you see here, you can actually go to GitHub and check out this workshop. What this does is it provides you with a sample code base that's already got some basic stuff in there and some steps. The directions there are designed to work with Cloud IDE, which is part of the Acquia platform, but of course, you don't have to have that. It just makes it faster and easier for you. The interesting thing about this workshop is that you can, if you follow the directions, you can go all the way from doing a basic Drupal 8 all the way to upgrading it to a Drupal 9, following all 5 of those steps, and you can do it in about 15 to 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. So it's a great way to kind of get your hands on it and see how it works. So definitely recommend checking it out. So to recap, there are 5 steps that you need to follow to upgrade from Drupal 8 to Drupal 9. Number 1, make sure that you are in a Drupal 9 compatible environment with the right versions of PHP. Make sure you have the memory and the code base set up the way you need it. Number 2, make sure you have Drupal 8 core up to date to the latest version. Number 3, make sure to update all of your contributor projects to their latest versions. You should get a lot of your D9 upgrades taken care of that way. Number 4, make sure and remove all of the deprecated APIs and function calls in your custom code. If you look in that workshop, we do talk you through how to use the upgrade status module to help you manage that, and it'll tell you exactly what you need to change. It's a pretty straightforward process. And then once you've done all of that, your code base should be D9 ready, and you'll be able to upgrade core to Drupal 9 itself. Finally, if you haven't done too much with Composer, Composer is going to be your friend, is going to help you out. Feel free to go back and look at the parts about Composer again, get in there and learn some of the basics. And again, if you take a look at that workshop, it'll provide you with all of the directions for doing the basics, which should provide you everything you need. So just remember, the great thing about Drupal 8 is that going from 8 to 9, it's actually not a huge feat. It's pretty straightforward. We've got a lot of resources here to make it easy for you, and go give it a shot.